Hello, everyone. Welcome back to GovCon Heroes Talent Unleashed, the podcast where we dig deep into strategies, stories, and people shaping talent acquisition in the world of government contracting. I'm your host, Junius Currier, and today we're jumping into one of the most timely and talked about topics in our space, artificial intelligence and recruiting and sourcing, specifically in the cleared government contracting industry. So from candidate matching to automated outreach to intelligent screening, AI is rapidly changing how we identify and engage top talent. But what's hype, what's real, and how do we stay ahead of what's staying human, right? So join me today. Is co-host Jennifer Jones, who is a thought partner and powerhouse in this space. She brings years of experience leading recruitment, innovation, and GovCon, and has been at the forefront of testing, implementing AI tools across federal hiring pipelines. So Jennifer, without further ado, it's good to see you again. It's been a few months since our last recording, much too long, but we're back at it. So how have things been going?
It's been a year, 2025, the year of the pink slip. I'm sure everyone just in the GovCon space is feeling the impacts of AI and just how drastic change it went from 2022 and, recruiters were making engineer salaries. Now we're just a few years shy of that. And I can't tell you how many recruiters and TA professionals and HR professionals that I've seen essentially get the pink slip this year, me being one of them. That being said, I think that there's been a lot of positives that have come up over the last, year or so. And part of that is AI for sure. I think that there's some really wonderful things. Obviously, Junius, I know you and we've been in the AI space for many years, beta testing several different tools prior to it becoming cool. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about this and just talk about some of the things that we can do as HRTA professionals to really be at the forefront and have a deep understanding of AI and just, the positive things that it can do for companies.
Yeah, I think right now, AI aspirations are just running rampant right now, and this is not like unnormal when any disruptive technology happens, right? It's kind of like a hype cycle, right? So,
Right.
and we see this all the time, like when new technologies come out, it's like on everyone's mind, they're talking about it. And then, you have a whole slew of vendors that are coming in, repurposing older technologies as this new technology, to try to take advantage of this hype. And so right now, I feel like we're kind of in that midst of like peak of inflated expectations. I think Gartner, which is a research firm that I tend to get a lot of good data from, they kind of coin that phrase, right? The peak of inflated expectations. And then you're going to kind of go through the trial of disillusionment. And then eventually we'll get to the slope of enlightenment, which is where we're going to land at some point, which is like, what is this technology truly capable of and how can we best leverage it, right? So, some of the biggest challenges that I think that we will be confronted with are there's going to be data issues. There's uncertainty about what is considered best practices in this space. There is something that I have experienced as a leader with managing multiple teams is change fatigue. We're just constantly being confronted with, hey, here's new technology, here's a new way of doing things. Here, you're right, and and that starts to weigh on people because it can just feel like a continuous cycle of having to learn, iterate, adapt, and people can kind of feel burnt out by that. And then there's the realistic challenge of employee skill gaps. And, unfortunately, the reality is, some organizations do better than others with putting a lot of forethought into, hey, how is our current workforce positioned to meet the emerging needs of our organization? And sometimes, unfortunately, it is true, but unfortunately, especially usually the first groups of people to feel impacts are groups that within an organization are maybe looked upon as like cost centers or areas where they don't necessarily generate revenue for the organization, right? They're more like support functions. Doesn't mean
Yeah.
they're not valuable. It just means that, there could have been bad business decisions made earlier, right? Where people were over hiring, right? like there could be a lot of different things that factor into reductions in force and so forth. But I think as far as AI, I share your optimism, and I tend to be a glass half full kind of individual anyway. I think there are going to be a lot of benefits to not just our industry and TA and HR, but I think just across all industries, they're going to benefit from artificial intelligence and the access to information faster, the
Yeah.
ability, yeah, right? Like how could that not be a benefit?
I completely agree with you. Some of the things that I've seen recently as one of my side projects is I've been doing some AI prompt engineering, and I have specifically been testing out around 8 different AI right now.
Okay, that's
Around
fantastic.
8 different AI platforms, and what I've been doing is really putting like reports that may have taken me a week to put together that I would have presented to the CHRO or the executives, the C-suite, whenever we're doing presentations at the end of the week on what the team has accomplished. One of those reports I was actually working on this morning, and it was talking about turnover, and I was just kind of seeing what the AI was going to spit out. And I'm telling you, what would have normally taken me 2 or 3 days to put together, the AI tool was able to, one, affirm that my information was correct, that my calculations were true. And secondly, it was able to kind of put all that into a really easy and clear presentation that just doing a PowerPoint slide can, and having all of that put onto the PowerPoint slide. Sorry, I'm not voicing this well. Gathering all that information and putting it into a clear, concise way for your leadership team. I mean, it can take some time to put together, and what would have typically taken me, 3 days, I was able to accomplish in about 4 hours this morning, which I thought was absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and we're just talking about like, are you talking about like ChatGPT or like what AI tool were you using specifically, if you could speak to it?
So I was testing out several, tested out around 6 tools this morning to see, one, if they were going to get the same information I did,
Okay,
and
nice.
because I was wanting to see which ones are the most accurate in doing those mathematical equations, which um yeah, I feel like in the prompt engineering I get real competitive, and I'm like, I'm going to stump you, AI. I'm going to do it.
No, probably not. It's really good at processing information very fast. Yeah. Yeah.
But it's phenomenal at processing information fast, but some of these, more empathetic type things that we as humans can process, AI is definitely limited.
Yeah.
So there are it's been interesting work, to say the least. But it's also helped me by doing the prompt engineering. It's been helping me to really learn and understand AI. And because I think that there's a whole lot, like to your point that you were speaking about earlier, there's a whole lot of hype going on right now. There's some, it seems like the news just wants to scare us that it's going to take all of our jobs, and a lot of clickbait that we're seeing out there. And I think that once people really understand just how robust and great it is, and how, it can be a time saver for us, not necessarily take our positions, I think that things will start to level out for sure.
Yeah, for
Now,
sure.
are there
Let me
some
ask you this:
tools?
what do you think about the rise of talent intelligence? Do you think AI is going to help to really kind of maybe kind of cultivate a kind of a new emerging focus on data analysis, leveraging data around talent to inform strategies for organizations, whether at the executive level or at the upper leadership level down to middle management, and to help inform like, hey, here's how we can both attract, maintain, and upskill. What are your thoughts on AI maybe providing some significant gains in that area?
Well, as you were mentioning Gartner, the talent intelligence tool within there is quite expensive, and it may not, well, at least I've seen it in my case. The talent intelligence hasn't been readily available on the market, and now it's definitely opening it up. So even the small businesses can really start to hone in and sorry,
Sorry.
are you echoing?
No,
Oh,
not on
okay.
my end.
It's echoing on my end. Sorry, threw me off. But to your point, talking about Gartner, I think that Not all companies, and certainly not all companies, not the smaller ones, have been able to afford tools like that. So it hasn't been readily available to them. Whereas now, I mean, just ChatGPT is what, $20 a month, and you can throw data in there and get some really robust reports for your leadership team that certainly wouldn't have been available several years ago. But 20, even back in 2018, 2019, prior to the pandemic, we didn't have that at our fingertips. So I think that it's empowering to both TA and HR, because now you can go into meetings with actual substantial data at hand, instead of saying, oh, we just couldn't get it filled. Now, everybody that is able to afford the $20 a month on whatever AI tool that you prefer would be able to put together some robust information for their teams.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things, right? Because I think a lot of times people think of, like a ChatGPT or a Copilot or some of the other vendors out there. They just, like, it's like understanding the different kinds of technology, right? Like those are primarily large language models that predict, the appropriate response based on your prompt and based on like all of the information that it has, which is amazing, the amount of information that it is digested. And there are some significant changes that are incoming, right? Like for instance, like, ChatGPT has the ability to like its ability to code, right? And the accuracy of its code and how it's had impacts and how it's going to impact software engineering into the future. But that also begs the question, well, who's going to oversee the quality of that code, right? Like who's going to do the prompting, who's going to oversee the quality of it, and who's going to make sure that the AI does not deviate from the scope that it has been presented. So I think some of the industries that we are maybe necessarily just like, oh, it's going to eliminate it. Yeah, I mean, I think like any disruptive technology, some of the lower hanging, actions, right, that people had to do because it was what was necessary in order to get more value added work done, right? Those people that, maybe people that are dedicated to those functions are probably going to cease to exist because you have a technology that can now do it more effectively, do it more efficiently, and do it faster, and maybe even with more accuracy than was done manually, right? So I think that's just, to think otherwise, I think is kind of being disingenuous. Like I think that's going to happen. But I say all that to say, like, how do I think it's going to segue into like recruiting and HR? So do I think it's going to help organizations be more efficient with less? So yes, will it have impacts on the number of jobs? Yes. But will it get rid of recruiting? No, I don't believe so. I really don't. Like I see like people put out like stories about, oh, this company got rid of all their, it's like good luck, because like probably in a year they're going to be looking to hire people, because, and it also depends on your industry. Like if you're hiring for like entry level positions that don't require a lot of independence, don't require a lot of like value add, like strategic inputs, right? Then yeah, those roles probably you can get by with more automated technologies, right? Like you really could. But a lot of the work that you and I are accustomed to doing, where the very focus of our organization is to sell solutions to the government, to execute new products, services, migrations, system upgrades, like new technologies, or building like weapon systems or whatever, like that's very strategic technical work, and you're going to still need to have humans involved in the process to find that talent. There's not enough AI in the world to understand nuance, right? Maybe eventually the technology will get to the point where it understands how to find cleared people without them telling you that they're cleared. Like maybe it will get trained to do those kind of things, but that's not the only thing that a sourcer does, and that's not the only thing that a recruiter does as well. So I think those are some of the things that I think are maybe a little bit further down the line that could potentially change, but I don't think we're there yet.
No, I
I
don't.
really don't.
I think the biggest impact that we're going to see is going to be toward the lower level type positions where there's a lot of manual data entry involved.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, a call center where you're hiring hundreds, thousands of people in a month, and it's a lot of mundane processes that you're having to do on a computer. I think that those types of roles are going to be the most impacted. Those types of recruiter roles are going to be what we see the most impacted. The higher level, obviously, the higher level candidates that you're working with, you're going to need to have that human element involved. And I don't see AI really taking the place there.
Yeah, I
And
mean, I like to think about like too, right? Like I think it's going to be an evolution too. So I think there's going to be a lot of technology that's going to come about that are going to provide efficiency gains, that are going to help shift the focus of recruiters and sourcers again to continually to evolve to be more strategic, and focus their activities on more value added work, whether from a business partnership perspective, right? Like, I like to think of our recruiting teams, like they're best cementing their value when they are working with their business partners, solving problems around staffing, whether it's because of budget constraints, technology constraints, location constraints, right? Like leveraging talent intelligence, really looking at the data to show like historically how we filled roles from a time to fill perspective or a time to offer perspective. What has been our funnel? What does it look like historically? Where there could be some efficiency adds by, maybe utilizing programmatic search engine optimization, digital marketing versus, going the organic job posting route, leveraging our sourcing teams. Like those are like true consulting behaviors that our recruiting team is best aligned to drive value into the organization, especially when like Jen, that our work is all about filling positions so the organization can capture revenue. So right, like that's essentially how government contractors on contracts where we're providing solutions, they got to bill, right? And if you don't have someone in a slot in an LCAT, you can't bill the government. So is there our recruiters' time better spent coordinating interviews, coordinating meetings and schedules, or is their time better served really looking at the data, right? Like, is their time better served like on a million pre-screen calls, or right, or dialing, or would their time be better served actually not having to worry about dialing at all by having a system that sets up like, hey, I'm working on this rec today or these recs. I want you to automate like reaching out to everyone that's in my CRM, or as I'm pulling people in, here's a list of 25 people, and then having systems set up to continually reach out to those people, and then connect the recruiter to them once they pick up, right? So that's where I really kind of see like the next wave of efficiency gains is going to be about automating a lot of manual tasks that take time. So that way our recruiting and sourcing teams have more time to do those things that drive the most value. What are
right.
your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I was actually doing playing around again in my AI prompt stuff. And one of
Yeah.
the things that I was interested in was to see, how much time is spent by recruiters on manual tasks. And how much that impacts the company as a whole. When I know, like, when I've priced out a couple of these automation tools, it's a pretty good chunk of change. I've priced out a couple that were 40, 50,000 a year, and that's a really hard sell when you're going up and talking to your leadership team to even start the conversations about automation. But whenever you're
Yeah.
able to really look at your team and derive, if we take the interview scheduling, if we're able to automate that, how much time is that going to give back to our recruiting team? How about even just recording phone calls and having, the software annotate your conversation and then analyze that conversation and give you, key talking points from that call with your candidate, right? And as a recruiter, prior to these automated processes, I can tell you that I spent quite a bit of time putting all that information into the CRM. And in that time spent manually putting that into the CRM, I could have spent building my relationships with the candidates. right? I think a lot of people over the last, 10, 20 years have gotten really jaded on recruiters.
Mm.
And I say
What?
that
Why
because
do you say that?
for one, a lot of people are getting ghosted. Two, they're getting fed a lot of false information about HR systems. I was in an interview yesterday and I was told that if your resume is over 2 pages long, that ATS systems automatically deny you. And this was from a workforce development company that was telling me this. And and I know that that's not true. I've been working in TA for over 10 years and I've never once seen any ATS systems automatically decline somebody based on the length of their resume.
Yeah, there's a lot of myths out there for sure.
There's a lot of misinformation out there. But with that misinformation, we haven't, I feel like recruiters, especially the ones that do a lot of that mundane processing are so stuck working on these processes, making sure all their information is in the system, that a lot of them have steered away from the relationship building.
You talking about dispositioning, right? Dispositioning, yeah, yeah,
Right.
and right, like, yeah, wouldn't that be a benefit, like to have like automated systems in place that can provide a better candidate experience? I mean, that's been like one of the biggest gripes that I hear, that I've heard like since getting into talent acquisition is, recruiters don't call me back, I don't hear any information, and a lot of the reason why, right, in my opinion, is because recruiters are overworked and under resourced, right? Like
Right.
they can't possibly get, like, I'm sorry to say this, but the reality is this: like, if I have a rec open and I get 1,200 applicants, I'm probably not going to be able to give like an A+ uh, candidate experience to every applicant, especially when it's one rec out of maybe 15 to 25 that I have.
There's not enough time
So
in the day.
there's not enough time, right? Like you got hiring managers who are screaming like, "Hey, I need my roles filled." You got candidates that are in the final throes of the interview process that you're trying to get to the finish line. I mean, it's just not enough time to be able to give white glove service to every candidate. With that being said, it doesn't give an excuse that we should deliver a bad candidate experience. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is I think part of the gripe that sometimes people don't necessarily understand is that you have a recruiting function that has not necessarily had the opportunity to leverage technology in a way that allows them to scale, right? And so I do think, to your point, I think that's where you were going with the AI technologies, having like agentic AI embedded into your TA function or HR function, right, will allow for some of those gaps to really be addressed, right? And it could
Right.
actually ultimately provide a better candidate experience. Because, yeah, right?
I don't think we're to the point where it's creating. I think we're in the process of getting there. I think that we're fundamentally seeing a big shift right now in TA as a whole. I think that it's going to wind up being a positive thing, but we're at that stage where things are bumpy, right? Things are
Yeah.
I think that there's been a couple of, I was reading a news story about the companies that had automated processes where they were declining candidates through ATS systems. And again, all that misinformation that we're seeing in the news, not helping, not
Yeah.
helping. But I think it does shed some light into the ethics of AI,
Mm-hmm.
and I do see that being it's already, ethics is already obviously a big part of TA, but I think that that's going to be a major part of our positions as we move more or continue to move into a more of a strategic advisor role for TA rather than, you know, the recruiter that just sits here and moves people through the system and hardly talks to them because I'm spending hours at a time making sure my data is in the system so I can prove that I'm
Which
doing
is
my
where I
job.
think which I think is where we always wanted to be, right? So, like, as long as I've been in AI, sorry, in talent acquisition, it's always been the goal for a talent acquisition, right? Like, we've heard that phrase, have a seat at the table, right? We've all heard that phrase. And to be an advisor, not an order taker, not someone who's just like, yep, I got a rec, go fill it, right? That's a transactional kind of process, right? Where you want your talent acquisition organization to be strategic, to really have a impact on the business, which makes sense, right? Because a corporation is nothing but a collection of people, right? And typically the teams with the best talent win more in business, right? So it makes sense that your TA, your talent acquisition function, should be a strategic partner to the business, because without great people, you don't have a great organization, right?
Correct.
And we're lucky in DoD, or not just DoD, but we're lucky in GovCon, right? Like we have that very black and white correlation between revenue to what we do in TA, right? The bodies help generate the revenue for the organization. So, but I've been in organizations where, TA was an afterthought, even though they had like one of the biggest impacts on the revenue that the organization was able to actualize. And what was missing was that strategic piece and that messaging piece, right? So, and I think it's important as an industry that we lean forward into adopting technology and embracing the changes, right? Like not to be like, oh, it's taking all of our jobs and, doom and gloom, but more about, hey, let's learn about, like, we recognize that there's some impacts, but here's the thing. Talking about the impacts, the negative impacts, is not going to change what eventually is going to happen.
Right.
Right. Like, just because you say, hey, these, this is going to eliminate these entry level jobs, talking about it ad nauseum is not going to change that. But what can help people to find different levels of work within the organization is talking about, hey, here's how it's going to impact these jobs. And here's the next step in your career path to prepare yourself to take on different kinds of roles within your industry. So that way you're not a casualty of just a natural evolution of work, and I think that's something that is interesting too, right? Is like, as I've gotten older, and maybe you feel the same way, Jen, and chime in here, is I think we're all having to just understand that the work that we did 10 years ago is fundamentally different from the work we're doing today. And the work that we're going to do 10 years from now is going to be fundamentally different. And the way that we set ourselves up to be employable and to be of value to an organization into the future is to continuously develop, right?
Well, and you can't, thinking back on my first job, I walked in, I had a piece of paper, a resume, they handed me a piece of paper, filled out my application, and then there was no ATS, there was no system, nothing in place. Really, I don't even recall, except for my having to put in my hours. I think that was the only digital system that I used at all in my, back then. I didn't have a cell phone. I didn't, I had a digital camera. I remember that. But and that wasn't that, well, okay. I don't think it was that long ago. We're talking 15, 20 years ago. And how far we've come from that to now we're having a conversation about AI essentially being so robust that it can have conversations with candidates.
Yeah.
There's this new tool called Kara. Have you seen it?
What is it called? Kara? It sounds familiar, but I cover it, like, because I can't recall right offhand.
So it's your AI recruiter. And it is essentially an image, or,
Yeah.
it is. I did it just because I was curious. I wanted to see what this was. And I was impressed by the tool. Like, if I didn't know it was, well, I didn't know it was AI. But just went through screening questions, and it was pretty cool. It was interesting. It was neat, and the AI image really did look like a person. So even though it did disclose I'm not a real person, but still, I thought it was interesting. I'm kind of on the fence about it, in all honesty. I thought it was impressive. I thought it was neat, but I don't really trust not having, a human factor involved in that transaction. Anyways, but to go from, 15, 20 years ago when it was, paper, everything, to now, I'm on a video call and this AI is talking to me like it's a person. It's wild.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality is, right, is like, so a lot of people are like, well, hey, like, how's AI gonna impact sourcing tools? I was like, well, I mean, there's been some form of, and I wouldn't call it AI, I call it more like machine learning, because it's really more, and it's not even machine learning. I'm sorry, it's more like automation, right? Like, so, like, for instance, like Seekout or Hire Easy, well, they've built in some agentic AI capabilities, right? Like, to provide like the chat GPT like into like the messaging. And then but for the most part, like the biggest lift that we got out of like Hire Easy and Seek Out was the automating part of it, right? Like I tell people all the time, like any really good sorcerer could do anything that Hire Easy and Seek Out can do, but it would just be so time consuming, like you would never get anything done, right? Like, like one sorcerer, like even if you could scrape all of LinkedIn and scrape, all of Clearance Jobs and scrape like whatever, like Google Scholar, and you got your CSCs, you scrape all that, and then you enrich your data. It's still, that's a lot of freaking time it's going to take.
It's
Right.
incredibly time consuming.
Or you can go to Hire Easy, right? Or you can go to Seek Out, enrich some, do some searches, build your Boolean string, do some searches. If you get some contact information, if you can't get it, you know, export that, upload it into Hire Easy, see if it can find the missing piece of like. But it's, again, it's a workflow. So I tend to think of like, like now, could there one day be like a people, like, I think there's a tool that's out now, I haven't used it, but it's called like Jukebox AI. Have you heard of that one, Jukebox AI?
Mm-mm.
It's like it's an AI, it says it's an AI talent engine search that scans like 800 million profiles, and saying that it can get rid of the need for Boolean searches. So could there be a time? So here's the thing about search is always only going to be as good as the user. So you can have the fanciest AI tool in the world, but if you don't know how to search, and I mean, search is very nuanced. A lot of people think, oh, it's just straightforward. So they'll put out like all the time, right? And you've seen this, Jen. You're trying to find a hard to fill position, and they build the search to represent like the resume. And you're like, well, why are you doing that? Well, because that's what it says the resume needs. I know, but now you're assuming that someone who actually has the talent you're looking for just premonitionally determine that they're going to write their bio and their profile exactly how you wrote your JD, your job description. Like, that doesn't happen. You have to. So that's the human element of sourcing that I'm talking about. Will AI know, hey, I'm searching for this kind of systems administrator, and through enough searches will that AI know, hey, this talent pool doesn't necessarily always say that they use this tech stack this way, right? Like, say if it's like an IBM product, does it know that maybe not everyone uses the IBM? Maybe they use the actual tool name of the IBM product to describe that
Right.
experience. So that's the human element, the inference that I'm speaking to, that I'm just not sure that AI is, well, it's definitely not there now, but will it get there? I don't know. We'll have to see.
Yeah. I don't know if it will, but I know for me, like some of the things that I do to utilize AI in my recruiting processes, my sourcing processes, I have it write out a Boolean string. I know if the Boolean string is going to work because it's my second language. But,
Yeah.
and sometimes it spits out, Boolean strings that I know aren't going to work, but I can then tweak them and make them work. But it, takes that mundane task of, well,
Of doing
you
it,
know the
right? You don't
job
have to write it.
description that we
Yes.
get can be completely insane.
But
And
you can
the
just prompt it. Yeah. Yeah. But
so
see,
I
so here's the thing. Here's the thing. And I know I'm interrupting you, but there's a reason why. So I know that, right? Like, that's like one of the simplest things. Hey, AI can do it for, I don't have to do it. But do you know how Boolean works?
right.
Because AI can get it wrong, and it does quite often.
It does.
It's good at doing the manual tasks very fast. But in terms of actually writing out complex Boolean strings the way you need it to be written out to find people, it's actually not that great. It's
No.
actually not that great. And so if you have a lot of recruiters and sourcers who don't actually know how Boolean operates, then they're not able to adequately figure out, like, hey, when they get that Boolean product back, like, hey, this is not the way it's written right now, is not right. I need to reprompt it to refine it, right? or be very specific in your original prompt to get the response out. But if they don't know how Boolean operates, they're still not going to be able to find the right kind of talent. You get where I'm going with that?
And some other ways that I've utilized it in my processes is um, instead of sitting there and manually write down my entire conversation with the candidate and then write it again for the hiring manager to get an email drafted, I just throw my notes from the initial conversation with the resume and have it spit out some um, emails or even just notes for our CRM system. And that, I mean, it adds up how much time it's saving. And just to sit there and manually type it out, it would normally take me 5, maybe 10 minutes. But if I throw it into AI and then proofread it, that takes me 2 minutes, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the one of the things too, that so there's a couple of different things. I think there's like talent intelligence and engagement platforms like Eightfold AI. My organization, we use Eightfold. So I love the AI ability of it to match candidates with roles internally, supporting like mobility moves, identifying at scale, like where our talent is, and figuring out like are they where they need to be in terms of like upcoming business needs and the demands for the upcoming business needs, like where do we need to like upskill. Like that to me is such an enhancement to actually help people retain work, right? So like spare me the doom and gloom, like that's fantastic utilization of artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
So I love that. But then there's other tools. So like what I'll just say to kind of end on like what I'm seeing, and then turn it back over to you. Like in terms of like practical uses that I'm seeing is AI screening and interviewing tools, right? Like AI driven video interviewing, assessment solutions to kind of automate some of that process to make it like more efficient, right? Like you don't have recruiters and sourcers like going back and forth with candidates about like figuring out like when they're available, and also it can help improve hiring manager partnership, because one of the biggest things that a lot of times hiring managers sometimes have feedback on is like, well, the quality of candidates that I'm getting, but if we work with them to devise like the right questions that they want us to ask, and then we have an automated system that after people apply and we have an intro call to vet, do some initial vetting, establish a relationship, and say, hey, we're going to do it like a video on demand as the next step in our process, right? And we've done this. Like we're actually doing this. We're leveraging that. It's not really AI. It's just technology that's been around for a while. But having like AI driven process, maybe they have like recommendation, like maybe there's like a bank of questions, and based on how people answer can, kind of flex the questions. So like maybe like this would be more beneficial for more technical roles, things like that. Like, so like, I think there's practical uses for like AI assisted interviewing. I think there could be some ethics questions around consistency, like in making sure there's not bias and that like certain groups of people aren't being asked like harder questions than others, like leveling, that kind of thing. But the last thing that I think is really good is around like recruiting platforms, like where AI might be able to help match, either candidates that are external or to roles that you have available, and then help to like do the initial engagement or internal matching. Like people who are already in your funnel have AI constantly reviewing and looking for people that have expressed interest to like maybe one of your join my talent community or whatever to your roles, and then alerting the recruiter without them having to press a button and saying, you have this open role. This person has expressed interest. He's a fit or she's a fit. Warm lead. Do you agree? Yes. Click yes. And then it automatically calls, right? And then that activity is logged in the system. No manual work. Like that's kind of where I think will help bring more value, right? Because now you can scale. Now you have recruiters that have more time on their hands. They can have more conversations, right? And they can do more partnership activities with hiring managers.
I definitely agree with you on that perspective. One thing that you were talking about is relationships with hiring managers. I, for one, am not an IT person. I'm not going to pretend like I'm an IT person, but I do technical recruit. And a lot of my time would be spent researching whenever I had a role that I'd never worked on before, or technologies or a tech stack that I'm not entirely too familiar with. One thing that I've definitely utilized AI for is just to learn the positions and really understand the technology more. One of the prompts that I use quite often is explain this to me like I'm 5. And it really it dials it down to where things make sense for me. So whenever I go to the hiring managers, then I can actually speak more intelligently about the technologies that they're wanting me to recruit on. And not just the hiring managers, but also the candidates. Early in my career in technical recruiting, I would mispronounce different technologies. And, looking back, I wish I would have had a software that just explained to me, this is how you say it, or this is some of the acronyms that are used. But I think there's so many wonderful things that are going to come out of this and that we're already seeing. And I think it's going to help both, or it already is helping relationships with our hiring managers and relationships with our candidates. I think that we will be more informed. I think that utilizing the tools for talent intelligence will help us quickly be able to ascertain, our searches and be able to help pivot and maybe broaden our perspective of what we're looking for. But, it's all about learning. And as you were mentioning when we first started talking, we are all having to learn technologies pretty rapidly, just in the last 15, 20 years. Again, we went from paper applications to now we're here. And that is profound to me.
Yeah, I mean, and I think you really hit on like constantly learning, right? Like for instance, like I think you mentioned earlier about like agentic AI, right? And a lot of people are like, well, what does that really mean, right? And it's just, it's a tool, an AI tool that either you can purchase from vendors that have built AI agents, or you can learn how to build your own AI agent that can help to automate some of the functions, right? Like around, just to help to increase like recruitment efficiency or candidate experience or overall hiring outcomes. I mean, these are things that like, Hire Easy has, they developed one. Seek Out recently built one. There's other ones out there. Sapia AI is another one. Cielo Agentic AI, right? And these things provide like automating tasks essentially, right? And just, we kind of talked about that at large, but I think we're going to continue to hear this like agentic AI. And what's interesting, at least from my lens, is I'm like, oh yeah, that's great. But I have like an enterprise system where I can't just build my own agentic AI and embed it. Like having an agentic AI that I build to just sit there disparately outside of my ecosystem doesn't really help me to automate anything, right? And so I think it's important to understand that, like, okay, these are great concepts, but every organization is different. Everyone, like my organization, what we support, the Department of Defense, among other agencies with high levels of clearance. So everything we do has to be like, has a governance board. Like, I mean, so I'm sorry, like I could be all excited about it as much as I want. You're like, oh, this is great. Like whatever I do has to be something that's going to be done and deployed enterprise wide and approved, and it's going to be a very, very long process. Right. But someone else might work for this cool like startup company and can spend the time going to YouTube, learning how to build their own agentic AI and really streamline the heck out of their workflow. Like they're a superstar, right? They can get more work done and they can scale using technology to their benefit. So I just think like there's no one size fits all approach that's going to work for every organization, for every personal situation. But it is really cool that the technology does exist, that whether it's you're working at a small, medium, or enterprise level organization, there are solutions to support. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, one of the newer models that, have you heard of Perplexity?
Yes. Uh-huh.
I love it. It is for data intelligence. Well, and I've talked about Data Miner. That's one of my favorite tools still. But to manually go in and, well, you take the data from Data Miner and then you have to go in and match everything, yada yada yada. Well, that you've scraped off the internet for it to be usable. One of the things that I've really enjoyed with Perplexity is being able to just data dump, and it organizes everything so easily. I love it. I am all about working smarter, not harder, right? And I for one, hate manual processes. So I am all for AI coming in and helping with that. I understand on a GovCon perspective, it to implement all of these automations, it's going to take a while.
Hey, you know
But
one thing that I think is also like pretty cool about like I know it's not nothing too like crazy, but it's just hard to imagine like maybe like 2 years ago this didn't even exist. But what I really like about like just like even like using like a chat GPT is you can literally just do like such a basic prompt. You can say, hey, listen, I'm about to cold call this person. Here's their resume, script for me real quick, a intro, and you can give it a tone. Say, hey, I want my intro to them like it's cold call. So, write up a script for me to engage them that is assertive yet not too salesy and pushy, but piques their interest in the role. And then give me a couple scenarios where they give me objections and draft some responses to overcome those objections. And they can do that in like
in
5 minutes,
minutes, yeah,
like in seconds. And
yeah,
so yeah, so something that like would take someone like a really long time to figure out, like, okay, how am I going to approach this cold call, right? Like now we can do it, like we don't even have to think about it, we can just prompt it, and then you can review it and say, okay, does this sound like me? Is this like, do I think that this would work? And then you can call, and then you make the call, and then you can decide like, hey, was that successful? And then you can say, hey, I got pushback, draft something else that would overcome this kind of pushback or this, and it can iterate. And then so like I just think like even like basic stuff like that helps people. To your point, you talked about earlier, right? Like we're talking about all the wonderful crazy things, but like just being able to drop in like Excel spreadsheets of data and say analyze this data and put it in a format that I can do, brief it on like an executive group or whatever, and it can do it for you really really fast and be
I
accurate.
think
So
there's so many wonderful things that I'm excited about with AI, but that is definitely one of the biggest things that I'm excited about. Because whenever you're talking with high level leadership, they want something quick and easy to view and to analyze, pages and pages of spreadsheets and put it together in a very quick and easy to view and concise report. It takes a while, but now we have wonderful AI tools like Perplexity and ChatGPT and Claude, and I really like Gemini. All these amazing tools that you can just dump that data in and you can have something ready to go. And as you know, working with high level leadership, they always want things right then. They want it before they ask for it, right? And this way you can have something really quickly put together for them, and it's not going to take you hours and hours of legwork to do it. So
that's what it's all about.
that's
Yeah. Well,
definitely.
listen, like even like the recording that I have software with the GovCon Heroes Studio,
Mhm.
it has an AI component where it's going to transcribe our entire recording, and then it's going to give me suggestions on the title. Like it's going to write it all out for me, and I just edit it like really really fast. And then it also edits the, so I mean like artificial intelligence and machine learning, like it's just going to continue to just much like how the internet revolutionized our lives, like our demographic gen, right?
Right.
Because we know like when we went to school, we had floppy disks, right? Like we were doing
Yeah, I
Oregon Trail,
remember.
right? Like
Oregon
we
Trail, yeah.
lived before there, yes, right? Like so we lived before there were cell phones. Like we know what that exists, but the internet changed everything, and this is what's happening again, right? So I mean, listen, I'm excited about it. I'm excited about it. So yeah, I think that kind of wraps it up. Unless, did you have any final thoughts? Anything else that you wanted to cover on the
I
AI
think
front?
the biggest thing that I want to leave off with is make sure that you are being at the forefront of this. If you don't understand the technology, if you want to learn more about it, there are dozens of courses on Coursera that you can take. I personally am working on one right now on AI engineering. And, not just Coursera, there's so many resources at a state level. Go to your local library. They have these resources available. Don't wait, because if you wait, you're going to get left. You need to start learning and understanding and get prepared, because this is, AI is here. It's already here. And just like whenever Google came and we had to learn it, and we had to learn it quickly. So
Yeah, absolutely. And just to kind of throw out like just some tools for people, like because I'm sure people are kind of like Well, what's out there, right? So like, Hire Easy, Seek Out Spot, Tezzy,
Right.
Rico Pilot, Sepia.ai, Cielo's Agentic AI. Those are some agentic AI tools and talent acquisition. You mentioned Perplexity, which I'll have to check that out. That's great. We talked about. So there's explore what's out there. And I champion what you said, Jen. I mean, honestly, I think that was a huge catalyst for me. Like, I talk to the teams I've had the privilege to kind of, work with and lead all the time about like, professional development is so huge in our industry. But it's not just our industry, it's any industry that you're in, right? You have to invest in yourself and your own
Right.
development, right? Like that you are the value that you bring to your organization. And if you're not investing in yourself, you're not stay curious, you're not challenge yourself to try new tactics, new techniques, learn new skills, right? Like to your point, right? You will get left behind. And we're in the information age. Things are continuously changing, but that's our reality. And so we can either choose to say, no, I'm not going to do it and get left behind, or you can lean into it and say, hey, man, I refuse to be left behind. So I'm gonna see what's new out there. And I love how you talked about the free resources. I think a lot of times everyone thinks that in order to like learn something, you got to get a certification. I have as many certifications as there are in my industry, and I can tell you I've learned just as much, if not more, from doing my own research, networking, and just investing in my own professional development as I have by taking courses that I walked away with a certification or taking a test afterward to say, hey, I did this thing, right? Certifications are nice, but don't feel like, hey, if I can't pay for a certification, that means I can't invest in myself. That is the furthest from the truth.
Right. And there's free programs through Google as well. Thinking of what you're talking about. There's actually free certifications that you can get on some these high in demand roles. Yeah, do your research, and yeah, I can look at putting together kind of a list of different free resources out there. I think that would be something we can add into this.
Yeah. All right. Well,
Maybe
Jen,
off to
I
the
know we were.
side note.
Yeah, yeah. Well, listen, I know we were minus Justin today. He couldn't be with us today because he had something pop up for work. But I really appreciate you hopping on, and this was fun. Really, this is a great topic, and probably one that we'll explore again in the very near future. Because
I'm
who
sure.
knows? The next thing is probably around the corner. So, with that being said, that concludes another GovCon Heroes Talent Unleashed episode. Hope those that are viewing, enjoyed it, thought it was informational, got a lot out of it. And as always, feel free to tune into the next episode.